today is take you through kind of how I would approach doing the SWAY presentation website in the context of this assignment. This is not meant to replace you having viewed those other two videos. So I almost assume in this that you've watched the SWAY video and the presentation or visual appearance tips video. You'll be responsible for that content in the context of an overall preparation for the midterm assignment. I've really enjoyed seeing your work develop as you kind of move back and forth between the writing assignments, which are so critical and so important to critical thinking and also communication. There's been some really wonderful development, and those of you that have really applied yourself to it, I am always pleased to see how your writing and your communication and your grasp of the concepts develop. And then you've also had some chance to do some programming hands-on. And this assignment is meant to bring these two things together, really. We are living at a moment now where many of you will be asked to compose, communicate, transmit, advertise, or critically navigate multimedia environments. And what we mean by that is environments that make use of text, video, social media, all sort of combined together. And as you know, I mean, you're already sort of immersed in that world, but our intellectual and professional lives are very much about that as well. So we're using a free program that is kind of a cross between a website development and a presentation resource. It's completely free. And I gave you a link for you to be able to sort of go and sign up. You do need to sign up with your email, but this is, it doesn't cost you anything. It's completely free, and it's a really terrific resource. It's very user-friendly, but as I'll point out in a minute, you do have to make some choices about how you bring content together. And that's really what this assignment is looking at. It's looking at your ability to take a text, to revise and go back and think about that text, in this case a discussion post from one of the units we've worked on, and then to not only revise and expand that and kind of, if you will, make that particular sort of text a little bit better or a little bit more user-friendly, but then to add two multimedia elements that expand, clarify, or improve on that text and what it's trying to convey. So I'm going to look at that process here, and that's kind of what my objective is. I'm not going to show you all, I'm going to go through the SWAY, but I'm not going to show you all the features of SWAY. You have the tutorials for that. And as the first tutorial and video indicated, really, the best way to learn SWAY is to get in there and play around with it. You can't mess anything up, and you can't delete anything, and it really allows you an opportunity to kind of play with these environments. What I like about this platform is that unlike a website or this kind of thing, not only is it very easy to use and you can get up to speed very quickly, but you do have to make some selections about how you group things. And really that's what composing in these environments is about. It's about making decisions about how you put things together. And I can't stress enough how important these skills will be to just about any array of academic or career professional activities or tasks you face in the future. This is the kind of thing that we really need to know how to do at this moment. And it involves not just working with a digital environment and developing some skills in that sense, and we've been doing that for the past weeks, but also to think about making arguments or conveying information in these environments. So it's a critical task as well in terms of thinking about how to do it. All right. There's a couple different ways to actually sort of develop a SWAY, and I encourage you to look at some of these other options. We're going to be using the Create a New SWAY. I want us to just go into kind of the blank canvas and work that way. But before we go here, we have to really sort of do the first step in the assignment. And the first step in the assignment has asked you to go back to one of your discussion posts. Now, this can be one that you just were really interested in. That's always a good way to go, in my opinion. Or it could be one that I gave you some specific feedback on ways that you might develop or enhance that. If you've already have a very successful post and one that I gave you some good feedback on, you may just want to expand it a little bit. It's a topic that you have interest in and you want to add some more examples or information. I will be posting this along with this video. This is a document that I really consider kind of the primary working document. So what have I done here? I've gone through and I've picked out, and of course this is just an exercise that I'm doing here. So I've just picked put together a random post that actually does need a lot of work. And some of you may be in a situation where you have more developed and more sophisticated posts to work from, which kind of is a help. But I'm working with one that still needs some development. So I've gone back and I've gone to Canvas or my hard drive, and I've pulled up that post I want to use, and I've copied it into a WordPress document. This can be just, a basic, the same way you've been writing the posts, Word, Pages, just a rich text editor. I've copied it. And what I've done here is I've given my hints on how I'm going about sort of revising or working on this text. And this is kind of the first step, right, is going back to that post, rethinking it, and seeing where you can clarify and add content. And that's the first step in this assignment, is that you really want to revise a bit that post. You should be expanding examples or adding content for clarity. And I've gone through, and you can look at this online, and I've given some ideas of where, if I was working with this particular post, places that I would go and expand. So for example, in the first paragraph, this author has a statement at the close of the opening paragraph that says the idea of hypertext can be applied to simulations and video games that require physical interaction. So this is a kind of a good focal point, but now I've said, here's a place maybe to talk about how hypertext and interaction are connected specifically. So one approach is to just sort of expand your argument. And many times I will tell you in a given week, hey, I think you've got a good focus here. Could you be more focused or specific in the way that you've argued that? And that's one way to begin to revise your text. Another is to offer more examples and more specificity. So in this particular example, this writer goes on to talk about a example of hypertext through an online marketplace business simulation game, and is really implicitly making the argument that this business simulation game is a form of hypertext. And so they've sort of got the beginnings of that, but then I say, here's a place at the end of this to be specific about your particular example. How does this game work specifically as a hypertext? They're talking about it as a simulation, but let's link it back to hypertext and maybe a definition of hypertext. There's another example of a place to expand. And I've given another example down here, and I won't go through all of these piece by piece, but I would like you to look at them. I've highlighted places where I think the writer could go back and expand and clarify. That's the first objective, folks, is that you want to go back to one of your posts and give some greater specificity or enhanced examples to sort of flesh this out a little bit more, okay? And I'm happy to help you with that. We don't have other readings. You're just working on this. And I do want you to put the effort in to do this well, which means getting started at a good point too. This is not an assignment that you're going to be able to kind of sort of start the day before. But if you get going on your text and your revisions, you want me to look at it, I'm happy to do so. All right, so take a look at that, and that should be your first thing, is really starting to work on revising a post that you want to work with. Okay, phase 2, which takes us into the sway environment. You're going to continue to enhance and clarify and multimedially compose this revised post by adding 2 elements, right? Remember, I asked you that you should have 2 multimedia elements. And as I've outlined in the assignment, multimedia elements refer to images, they refer to videos, any additional online content that helps to expand or clarify or make more compelling the information you're conveying in that revised post, okay? So I've added some, and these would be notes to myself as I was doing the assignment. What am I going to add in here? Where am I going to put it in the context of breaking this down? And I'll show you how this will all go into sway in a minute. But do I want a video that talks about hypertext as simulation? Is that something I could find as an added element? Do I want some images that show what hypertext looks like? So I'm not just talking about it, but showing the reader an example of hypertext. Maybe I'm talking, as I am up here, about a specific example. So maybe I want an image of a specific example that I'm working from. Or even a podcast that talks about how hypertext is relevant to education and learning. You can see how all these elements potentially relate back to enhancing the argument and examples of my revised post. Part of my work is just choosing two. Okay? Now, as I'll show you in a minute, this does not refer to like the background and the opening sort of platform to your overall Sway presentation. I'm going to show you this in detail in a minute. But the two added elements, I want you to pick two main ones that you're going to use to add into your post. And this puts you in a position where you have to select carefully, where you're not just popping images here and there to make it look good or to add content. You're specifically choosing content that will enhance, clarify, and build on what you're trying to do. Okay, so there's really two main steps to this assignment. You're going to revise and lengthen your post, right? And make sure you have a compelling title, right? Because the titling is really important in this way. I've chosen hypertext as simulation here. I could probably do something even a little more cool, but I do want you to think about the title that you're going to do. The title should be apt. It should point to the content. It should be something, if somebody found this on the web, they would know what you're talking about. And then you're going to decide on two multimedia elements to add to your presentation of your text. You should choose only two, and you should be selective about what you choose. Remember that the multimedia elements should add to the clarity and specificity of your text. Okay, if you have any questions about this, you want to be in touch with me sooner rather than later. What you don't want to make the mistake of doing is waiting a long time to get this taken care of and then feeling a little bit panicked because maybe you have some questions and doing it at the last minute. I'm happy to respond, as always, to your inquiries at any point. Excuse me, get my email out of the way there. At any point, but I want you to get started, and I want you to do this assignment in piecemeal. That's part of what I'm asking you to think through here. So I'm happy to answer questions through every stage of the process, but I want you to get started so you know what the main questions are up front. Okay, I'm going to be working kind of from this document, and this will be my base document as I go into Sway. You should have watched the Sway document, and you know how to get up and running with Sway. It's very simple to do. You kind of sign up with an account with your email, and then you're good to go. There is no cost to this. I'm going to create a new Sway. Okay, and you'll see it's loading up for me here. All right, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to title the Sway, and this is why coming up with a title for the post is really important. So I am going to stick with what I just had, hypertext as simulation. Right. Now, this is the beginning point for any Sway, and in the video, he shows you all ways to sort of emphasize this and play around with design elements. I'm not going to do any of that. That's for you to kind of experiment with as you go through this, and you should use his tutorial video for that. I'm just showing you how to think about this in the context of the assignment and the steps in working the assignment into this environment. Now, if you want to have a background, and this is important, so make a note of this right now, you're welcome to do so, and it does not have to count as one of your media elements. Okay? So let me say that again. If you choose a background for the front card of your presentation, your Sway, it does not have to count as one of your elements. It's a separate thing that is at the kind of the front or the start of the Sway, and it doesn't have to count as the two elements that you choose within the assignment. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do that because it gives me an opportunity to show you how, if you were adding images in, that situation would work with respect to this particular topic or focus. Okay, so I'm going to add a background, right? And it's already picked up some suggestions because it's looking at what I've typed, right? And remember, you can always search for terms, and these kinds of choices are really important to how successful this is going to be. Thinking about the information you give the environment, okay, will determine what it's going to give back to you. You'll get better selections. You'll get more appropriate results that you can use in integrating multimedia. I'm going to go ahead and just use, because I'm getting started, what it's offered me here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And now it's looking through all the different environments, and we'll look at the environments for possible suggestions of things that I might want to use as a background. Okay, some of these, it's hard for me to even tell if they're appropriate, but I kind of scan through them, I look at them, right? And let's say I want to go ahead and try something out. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and try out. Let's try this one out. And I'm looking right away at like the size of it, because for a background you want a good size image so that you're going to get some good clarity. And I literally drag and drop it. And as he showed you in the video, you can immediately preview as you work. Now, I have a problem right off, and these are the kinds of things I want you to be looking for, folks, as you work on this. If we were doing this interactively, I would ask, what's the problem here? And of course, the problem is that I have text, and even though it's been given a border because of the design, the default design, which I could change, okay, so that's one way of approaching this, it's creating this kind of overlap where the image is literally in conflict with the text. And quite frankly, it looks bad. It looks not very professional, and it looks like there's an issue in clarity here. And I will tell you why this is so important. The way something looks in multimodal environments often determine how people perceive the accuracy or the critical acumen of the information portrayed. So if I'm going to go ahead and just slap this together, I'm very often, the reader is going to come to this and go, wow, should I even trust that this author knows what they're doing or has the right information to offer, because they haven't made good decisions in terms of how they're displaying it. Okay, I want to leave preview. To leave preview, you always go back to your open storyline. All right, this, quite frankly, is not going to work, okay? So I'm going to go ahead, go back to this, right? I'm going to leave this open for right now. One of the ways that I can do this simply is, like I said, to go back and play around with the design elements. But I can also just replace the image, okay? And so what I might start doing at this point is just playing around with other types of images that I can place into the background. Notice that you always have, with things that you add, you always have the opportunity to just delete it, to go ahead and delete it, okay? And the same is true here. So if I click on details, right, it tells me information about sort of, you know, I can go through and make adjustments about sort of how it's emphasized or presented, or I can give it a caption, as the first video showed, or I can just get rid of it. But then I can still add a background. So let's go back to trying to get a background image in here. What about this one? Right. And again, I'm literally going through and I'm playing. Still a problem, right? I still have a problem here. Again, I might want to go through, and I'm not going to do a lot of this right here because I don't really have time, and I don't want this video to be too extensive. I want you to use all the elements together to work on this assignment. But I could go through and play with the layout and the design to see if I could get this to work a little better. But in most cases, I'm just going to want to go back initially and try to get things to work as best they can, just using the basic elements of layout. Okay, I'm going to try one more. Oops, let me wait. Let me click background. Okay, this is a little bit better, but I still have some issues here with the conflict. So I'm going to skip over this part and you know, at this point decide, should I come back to this, maybe try to go without a background at this point, or I would move over to playing around with the design and layout. But again, we have not hit on a good solution yet. I will show you very quickly before we end all this an example of one that does look pretty good, I think, that still works as a background. Okay, let's go ahead and back out of this. And I want to show you something else here in terms of adding in information to this first slide. How you want to think about Sway is as a collection of what they call cards. And individual cards really refer to, in the same way as if you were making a PowerPoint presentation, different slides. So the way to control information, okay, is to control the way in which you separate out your cards. And every time you create a heading, right, you create a new card, a new place, a new sliding environment. I'll show you how this looks in just a minute. So let's say I've got my front card. I want to go ahead now and I need a new heading. And now I'm going to go back to my document and I'm going to say, okay, now I want to talk about hypertext as simulation itself. So you see, now I'm starting to break down my argument into this environment. I'm going to start with my first paragraph, right? Okay. Before I put the paragraph in, I'm going to give it a heading, and I'm going to say, these are just examples defining hypertext as simulation. Whoops. I'm not used to this keyboard. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to add text to it. Right. And here I'm going to paste in the first part of my revised post short essay. Let's preview it again. All right. Now I have these buttons show up because I have created more headings. I have more slides or more cards. And I swipe. And here we go. I've now created a slide that has the first part of my text. Right? Okay. Let's go back. Now, if I don't create a new heading, I can just add more content into this slide. Right? So let's do an image. Now I have a new term I'm working with here, right? So I'm going to put in as a search term up here, defining hypertext, right? Or definitions of hypertext, right? And I'm going to just play around with putting this over here. Again, this is an image. Okay. And I think what's happened here is this has moved up on me rather than down here. Let's see what we've got. The way to keep track of your work as you do this is to just play around with moving things around and then previewing them. Okay, what I've done here is it does appear with the separate heading and card I've created, but what I didn't realize is I've actually inserted a video, which is not a bad thing. Maybe I want a video. The way to check for these kinds of things is that, and remember that anytime you search without sort of specifying sort of the resource you're using, you're going to get all sorts of things from the web, and I'll show you a little bit more about the different things that this environment is searching when it looks for content when you just put in search words. But if you see these little things that look like little pieces of film, those are videos. This is a tweet, right? This is an image, right? I can see it. It's an image because it has 220 by 157, so it's showing me sort of the dimensions of the image. Here's more videos. Okay, so you can see this is the kind of content, you're getting all this different content. You can control this more directly by saying, oh, well, what I want to insert, let me go ahead and get rid of this real quickly. Go back to, whoops. Okay. Beyond the suggested is that I can go through and search for specific types of content. So if I'm just looking for videos, I can just search YouTube, and it's just going to give me videos on hypertext. All right. Okay. So again, I don't want this to be too long, but I want to go back and emphasize something else here. So let's go ahead and get back to our actual pattern here in our storyline. Okay, so I'm putting these cards together and I'm adding in this various type of content as I go along. Every time I want a new kind of paragraph, a new slide, a new section, I'm going to create a heading card, right? And again, you just use that little green button, it gives you the options, right? And every time you create a heading card, you're creating a new section. You can have as many sections as you want. For example, I'm working with like 3 principal areas here. I've got an introduction, a kind of definition, I've got an example, and then I've got kind of an explanation of that example. So I'm thinking right off I'm probably going to have at least 3 main slides or 3 main headings, 3 main cards with sort of text. But I may have more. The only limitation is that throughout this I want you to pick 2 elements. 2 elements, okay? You can't have more than 2 elements within the context of these. So that's your limitation. You can create as many headings as you want with your text, all right? but I want you to be very specific in terms of the type of multimedia elements, those 2 elements that you're going to integrate. And of course, your background image does not count as one of those. So this means once you get your argument broken up and you select the kind of multimedia content that you want to insert to enhance things, you're going to want to play around with your layout quite a bit. And again, I urge you to go back and look at that first video for some examples of how to sort of reassemble your content and play around with the design. There's both design options and layouts, right? And this involves changing fonts. This is kind of nice, right? You see, this now has my cards side by side, so I kind of slide back and forth. And it's changed sort of how the image is integrated with the text. So really, you're going to have to play with this quite a bit. Whenever you want to sort of get a sense of what your, I'm going to hit escape from this, what your reader or viewer is looking at, you have the option of both previewing what it looks like and then hitting the play button that will allow you to get a sense of how others are coming at this and what they're looking at and what it looks at from their perspective. Okay. The remix button is a really helpful button to this extent and saves time. Again, make sure you've watched that first video where that's concerned. All right, so let me just go back and do a brief overview of where we're at so that you have, again, a sense of how this is working. And before I go, I wanted to show you kind of an example of where I've integrated a background image. Oops, I think it's revised my other one here. Let me go back here. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Here's an earlier example of, I'll go ahead and hit preview. And you'll notice how this background image actually kind of works with this a little bit better because it's patterned out the title or the heading, and the image looks like it's a little better integrated there. Okay. All right. So again, the objective is to go through, get that discussion post revised, break it down in the sections that you think sort of define the argument. Again, I have like 3 main paragraphs. Those of you that, and I've made this as a comment on several of your assignments, those of you that have tended to not break your discussion post down into paragraphs will want to do that because that's how you're going to think about breaking down your argument in the sway environment. So I have 3 particular areas here. I'm going to want to go back and expand on this so that I have more text, I have more examples, I have greater clarity in terms of my focus or argument. And then I have to pick 2 multimedia elements. The process for this is going to happen in this environment where you'll experiment with adding things in, playing around with how it looks. This is a really important assignment, okay, to the extent that it has practical applicability to things you're going to be asked to do in the future. And so I want you to take this very seriously. Some of you may find it challenging working in the sway environment, though it's very user-friendly. It literally is drag and drop and moving things around. Use the videos, watch the tutorials. And if you have questions, I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to look at your text, okay, as you revise it. This is not, you're not revising this into like a 5-page. You're literally adding at most another few paragraphs of information to this, okay? So as I indicated in the assignment, you're revising your original discussion post to be approximately 1.5 to 2 pages. So it's not an extensive revision. I just want it to be a careful revision. I want you to go through and make sure that you have examples, you have a clarity to your argument and focus, okay? And then the really sort of other aspect of this is using this sway environment to get multimedia integrated in that to help you make the argument, okay? So again, any questions, be in touch. Please start on this right away, or you could find yourself up against some questions about sort of how to finalize things and not have the time. All right, the last thing I need to show you is for submission. Once you've completed your sway, you have in this corner right here some share options. Okay, Now, while you're working at it, you can share it. You can click this button over and share it with just you, okay? Or you have the option of sharing it on Facebook or Twitter. For our purposes, and there are some more options, you can click on this and it gives the option of sharing this with somebody who can actually sort of recreate it or even change the layout of this individual sway. And like you could hand it off to somebody in a work environment and they could work on it. You're going to copy this URL right here, okay? So you see I just highlighted it. I could use my keyboard to do this, but I'm just going to hit copy, okay? And then when I go to Canvas, I'll go into the submission area, much like you have with your discussion posts. And when you click on midterm submission, it's going to ask you to paste this link. Okay, there'll be a space there for you to just paste in your URL and submit. Okay, so that's your submission. That's how you get your assignment to me. Your creation of your assignment happens in this environment. The last thing I want to tell you is that I want you to play around with this. Okay, this is an exercise that's meant to do a couple things. One, it's meant to give you some experience, practical experience in critical composition in multimedia environments. Hugely, hugely important at our moment, okay? And believe me, you're going to find yourself at some point in the future saying, hey, I know how to do this because I've done it in this environment before. It's that pervasive. All right. And secondly, I want you to be able to experiment a bit with an environment like this in finding the best representation for your post and the information on it. If you have questions, you can email me. We also have available to us in Canvas, right, this opportunity for conferences. You've probably seen this off to to the corner here. And if we need to, we can add a conference where we can invite all course members, or I can talk individually with some of you, or just each of you if needed, in an interactive environment where we have a document before us. So if we need to go this route, we have this as an option. Though I'm hoping that most of you will be able to navigate this and you'll just have questions about how you're laying things out, breaking things down, and maybe even about your revisions. You have over a week to work on this, okay? And you should have already started, so we have plenty of time for you to complete this assignment if you get started on it and don't put it off, all right? Okay, be in touch with any questions that you have. Please get through those videos, get through this video, read the assignment, and ask your questions up front, and then as you experiment and compose and proceed, be in touch with any further questions. All right. I will be in touch as well as we start to near the end of the midterm session when the next module will open. Okay, look forward to talking to you.